Okay, so I think we have waited for those like 5 minutes for those who are fashionably late for the webinar, but I think let's start. So welcome to the second webinar of this year from Scandiveb, and today's topic is moderated user testing, so insights from more than 400 user tests. As I said, if you have any questions while I'm presenting, feel free to write them in the chat, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So let's begin. So hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm a UX researcher here at Scandiveb. Just now in February, I have started my second year here. And on a daily basis, I'm focusing on user testing. So as you can probably guess, then doing UX audits for different websites and also participating in redesign projects. So basically when a client comes and wants to redesign their project, it's not only about doing design, it's also about doing research to make sure that the website will be according to best practices from the UX perspective, and then comes the design phase. A little bit more about me. So I have a bachelor's degree in business administration from Riga Business School, and I have a master's degree in market research and consumer behavior from IE School of Human Sciences and Technology in Madrid. So our agenda today will be, first of all, talking about what user testing is, so the different approaches and how to choose between all of them. Then also we'll talk about the practical setup, so how to form hypotheses, how to set up the tasks, and about note-taking. Then, at least for me, I think the most exciting part, 13 learnings from 400 plus user tests. And lastly, we'll talk about analysis and next steps. Before we begin, I realized that probably there are different types of people actually listening to this webinar. So maybe the first type of person is somebody who isn't really related to UX research or even marketing. So for you guys, my goal would be that you just gain simple understanding of what user testing is and why we actually use it. Then the second type of person I imagine is maybe related to marketing and is interested to know a bit more what is user testing and why we do it. And my goal for you is that you learn in detail about the user testing process and gain maybe courage to actually try it for yourself and your website. And lastly, maybe there is a UX researcher or a UX designer listening to this webinar. And for you, my goal is that you hear some new useful information that you can use in practice during your UX research work. Okay, so I hope all of these will come true. So let's get down to business. So what is user testing? So user testing is the process through which the interface and functions of a website, app, product, or service are tested by real users who perform specific tasks and in realistic conditions. The purpose of this process is to evaluate the usability of that website or app and to decide whether the product is ready to be launched for real users. So simply put, it's just the process of real people evaluating your website or app and telling you how they like it. So it's just the shorter version of the same definition. And there are different types of user tests. So the first one, usability testing. So imagine you have your website or you have your app and you want to understand if there are any issues on that website. So for example, you think there might be some problems with the filters on your website, or you think there might be some issues in the checkout. So usability testing is when users actually interact with the website, with the app, or sometimes you create like a prototype, which is not the real environment, like just staging environment for the website. And they perform different tasks in this environment or on the website. And you are trying to spot which are the issues on the website. So that's usability testing. Then there's 5-second tests. So this is a really interesting one. So imagine if you are the owner of the website, for example, you are very sure that it's very clear what you're selling or what's the message that you're trying to convey. But 5-second tests are when users are given only 5 seconds to look at your homepage, for example. And after the 5 seconds, the picture kind of disappears and they have to write what it is that this website is selling or what it is that is the main message of the website. And it's really interesting to see that sometimes it's not clear at all for users. So this is a really good test to actually perform to gain this outside perspective on your website. Similarly, we also have first click tests. So here we ask users where would be the first place that they would want to click. And we do this just to confirm that the main action that we want them to take matches the one that they would actually do. So for example, to check if the main call to action is catching their attention and that is the place they would click. So also a very useful test to do on your website. Then there's tree testing. So this one is related to menu testing. So imagine you have your first level categories in the menu, and then you have probably like the second level categories, and sometimes even you have like the third level categories. So all of that together creates this tree of categories. And in tree testing, we give tasks to users where we ask them in which category they would look for a specific product. So this is a very good test to understand if your categories are actually intuitive and people can find products on your website without using the search. So are they looking in the right categories? Then also we have card sorting. So this is again related to menu testing, but instead of like testing already a set up tree of categories, this time you give users cards of all the categories you have on your website. So if you are doing a physical test in person, then you would give them like actual like little notes with the actual categories written on them. Or if you are doing those digitally, then there's a program where you can just write all of your categories noted down. And what users have to do is they just group the categories into groups that make sense to them. And in this way, you can just see that maybe there are some changes needed in your menu because users in users' head, it makes sense that those are changed a bit. So also a very useful test. And lastly, there's eye tracking. So this is a very interesting one, and it's not often done, at least not in our experience. But so it requires special equipment. So either you have these special glasses through which user is looking at the screen, and then it records how the user looks at the screen, or you have to have this special software which records user's eyes from the computer. And so why we do this test is, well, sometimes users think they know what they see first or what catches their attention, but this is a very useful test to actually really understand where they are looking first, for how long, in what sequence they're looking at things. So it's a very, very useful test to perform. However, of course, as it requires additional equipment, it's also expensive. So actually, if you want to know more about each of these types of tests and some more tips about when and how to use them, we at Scandiveb had a separate webinar about this topic a while back from two of my colleagues. And afterwards, when you will get access to the slides here, you will also be able to click on the link there and watch the recorded webinar. So if you're interested, then definitely recommend learning more about the different types of usability tests. So let's move on to how to choose between moderated and unmoderated testing. So moderated user tests are when there is a moderator present during a test to guide the user, give tasks, and ask for feedback. And some pros of that is that it's possible to ask more during the session than initially planned. So imagine that the user did something unexpected or just gave you some additional idea. And if you are there in the test with the person, then you can always react and ask something additional and gain more insights. So that's definitely a pro. Also, you can always make sure that users complete the tasks as intended. So this is a big one because if they read instructions and then misinterpret something, then you will be there to actually correct the mistakes and ask them to do the right thing. So that is also very, very important because afterwards, if you gain incomplete test results, usually we don't ask people to do it again. So yes, also a big plus for moderated user testing. Some cons of moderated user testing. So you have to plan more time for the process just because you have to be there. So either if you're doing tests physically with the person in the same room or digitally, which is probably more popular, but still you have to plan that you will have to be in those calls, you will have to spend time there, you will have to interact with the participants. So it just requires much more time. Also, users might want to be liked by the moderator and try to provide answers that they think the moderator wants to hear. So basically, imagine that for the user, you are maybe the owner of the website. Even if you're not, they might think that you are actually working for the company that you're testing. And sometimes they just don't want to give you bad news. So when you're asking if there's something wrong in the website, or maybe they don't like something on the website, they don't want to upset you. And so they try to give you like positive answers and just, give you positive feedback. So that's also something to take into account. And then in comparison, there's unmoderated user tests, and those are when no moderator is present during a test to guide the user. So user has to follow instructions and complete tasks on his own. Some pros are that it's faster, so you don't have to be there. You just prepare the tasks, users complete them, and you look at the results. Then also users are not influenced by the moderator. So the way how you have set up the instructions, they will just read them, interpret them, and follow them. So they're more likely to actually give you maybe honest feedback because they don't see you, they don't want to be liked by you, they will just tell you what they think. Some cons, so something can always go wrong if instructions are not 100% clear. And actually, I want to tell you that even if the instructions are 100% clear, something is very likely to still go wrong because people just interpret things differently. And yes, so they just do maybe something else than what you asked. For this one, a tip. So before you actually publish the instructions and send those to the users, a good way how to test the instructions is to send those maybe to a colleague who is not involved in the project. So they read them and tell them if they understand what they have to do. Or even if you could send those to like a friend or a family member, that's also good because they're not in the industry and they might give you more like honest feedback as well. But of course, you have to take into account confidentiality. Then also you might get incomplete results. So as I mentioned before, so if they misread something, or maybe they just skip a task, and then afterwards you look at the results and you realize something is missing. So nothing really you can do there. You just have to think then what you will do maybe with this incomplete test result. And also test setup takes more time. So because you have to be sure that all of those instructions really make sense and you know that you have done your best and the instructions are really, really good, you just spend more time setting up the actual test. So yes, as you see, like I'm not going to give you an answer if you're asking which one is better, because there's no answer to that. It's just you have to evaluate the situation. You have to look at the options that you have and decide for yourself. Are you going to moderate the test, or are you going to just set it up before and then afterwards look at the results? Okay, so let's turn to practical setup for user tests. So the goal for each test, the goals for each test are unique, but the process stays the same. So first you start with a hypothesis. So what are you actually going to test? Then you decide between using a platform or testing yourself, like setting up a test by yourself, or lastly, preparing the task flow. So there is a pre-test, the actual test part, and then also we have the post-test part. So let's start with the first one, with the hypothesis. So what it is that you actually need to test. So how do you know where's the problem, what you need to test? So first, my advice to you is look at the data. So if you're using Google Analytics, you can check different types of reports about your website. So look at the top page performance or checkout behavior report or navigation summary report. Like all of these different reports can lead you to a potential hypothesis. Maybe you see that there's a drop off in one of the checkout steps. Something might be wrong there. Or maybe you see that people are struggling in the navigation, like they're switching the categories all the time, and you just sense that maybe they have problems there. Yes, so any like drop-offs or unexpected numbers might lead you to a potential hypothesis. So this is a really good source to actually start looking for your hypothesis. Then also a very interesting way for looking for a hypothesis is actually looking at how users behave on your website. So for example, if you're using such a platform as Hotjar, you can see actual session recordings of how people are navigating or how are they behaving on your website. I think before I started working at Scandinavia, I didn't know that you can actually see recordings of how people are shopping on your website. So don't worry, you're not like filming them on their web camera, but you're just seeing how the cursor is moving around the website, where they're clicking, how they're navigating the site. So all of that can give you really good insight because, for example, you're seeing that a lot of users are struggling to filter the products on product list page, or you're seeing that they're having trouble switching the photos on product details pages. So all of these will just give you insight into the problems that maybe they're facing on your website. Also, you can look at the heat maps. So there are different types of heat maps. There's click maps, move maps, and scroll maps. And all of these also can give you a sense of how users are behaving on your website. So for example, you're seeing that on the scroll map, you're seeing that people are not scrolling as far down the page as you want them to. And then you realize, okay, so the content that is down there at the page at the end of the page, like they're not seeing it. So that's a problem. Or they're not clicking on the main call to action that you want them to click on. So that's, again, something that you would want to change and test with the user test. And lastly, there's user surveys. So also a good way how to gather feedback from your users on your website. So those could be just different questions that you ask for your actual customers on the website. So for example, was there anything that you disliked today on our website? Or did you experience any pain points while you were shopping with us? So different types of questions that you ask, but then afterwards you get quantitative results, and you can just really see if there is something in common that people are saying and stating as a problem on your website. And also if you are planning any major change on your website. So for example, if you're thinking about doing design changes, it's also a good idea to actually test how users are perceiving these design changes, and if they understand, of course, like also the main messages, and if they would still perform on the website as you would like them to. Then, as we discussed before, if you are thinking about changing the menu, then it's maybe a good idea to consider the street testing or card sorting to actually understand how your users would want to see the menu. and also changing like sequence of the blocks or messaging. So actually any type of small change, you just want to make sure that real people will understand what you're telling them, and testing it with the user test will just reassure you. So any of the previously mentioned reasons can lead you to your hypothesis. And so I see that we have a raised hand. So if you have questions already, then feel free to write them in the chat. And then afterwards, at the end, we will have this Q&A session. Okay, so yes, as I said, any of those can lead you to your hypothesis, which is your starting point for your test. So let's move on to using a platform versus testing by yourself. So how are you going to test practically? So using a platform, so there are many great user testing platforms out there that can take care of the practical setup of your tests. So pros are that everything related to the test, like participant list, task instructions, tasks themselves, and recruitment, and so on, everything is organized in one place. So you don't have to, manage all those different links and platforms and everything. So everything is nicely organized in this one place, and it just makes life easier for you. So also you can save a lot of time. So for example, you just set up your availability on the platform, and the tests are scheduled very, very quickly. So I've had this experience. I've used this user testing platform, and if usually doing it by yourself takes a lot of time in recruitment process, because you have to send emails or call the participants and ask them if they want to participate, and offer them different times. So all of that just takes much of your time. But then if you're using this platform, then it's much, much faster. And also you can reach a lot bigger sample of testers. So you're not limited really to your own ability to reach people. These platforms have a huge database of people that they send out, that they look for, that match your audience descriptions, and they invite those people to the tests. Some cons, so of course it is expensive. Yeah, just like that, it is expensive. Then depending on the platform, you might be limited in the types of tasks you can give to users or amount of questions you can ask. So this is a big one. If you have like a very specific scenario in mind that you would like to test, sometimes in these platforms, you can just really do everything you would normally want to. And also, sometimes the audience you get is too generic. So even if you set up those screener questions and make sure that you ask for like a very specific audience, it just sometimes happens that, yes, the audience still isn't quite the one that you wanted, and you can't really do anything about it. If you already have the person in the test, you just have to accept that maybe you will get probably valuable feedback, but it's not going to be the specific person that you wanted. And then there's doing it yourself. So you organize the whole process manually, you recruit people yourself, you test the scheduling, you also do the test moderation and analysis. So you basically do everything yourself. Pros are that it's cheaper, of course, but you just have to invest your own time and resources. Then you can create a completely personalized test experience, matching your project goals and needs. So this is a big one. You can do different types of tests with the same person, and you can switch up the questions and everything. So just create this unique test as you want. You are more likely to test with exactly the audience of your website, because probably you are recruiting people through your social media channels, or you're sending out newsletters. So different ways how to do that, but they are more likely to be your actual users. Some cons. So it takes much longer and requires patience and understanding towards the testers. With understanding, I mean that sometimes it just happens that users don't show up to the tests, and then you have to write them again and ask them like, would you still like to participate? Can we reschedule? And you just have to invest more time and be patient with people. And also you have to be organized. So you will be managing several different documents, dashboards, and status lists, and you just have to keep up with everything like the participant list and what's the like the status, like are they scheduled yet? Did you send out the email? Did you send out the reminder? So it just requires organizational skills. So again, no right or wrong answer. You just have to evaluate yourself in which of those you see yourself better and act accordingly. And then also, does your test flow make sense? So there are 3 stages of a test usually. So pre-test warm-up, so asking questions related to your test topic and understanding habits and preferences. This is not a requirement, but we usually do this just to open the person up a bit. So imagine if the user is participating in a user test for the first time, he might be nervous because like they don't know what to expect. So asking these warm-up questions, they just open up a bit more the person, and they just start to relax a bit and just get used to the talking. So this is a good way how to start the test. And also by asking the right questions, you will get also some additional insights that might be useful for you as well. Then there is this test stage. So this is the part where the user would actually perform and complete a set of tasks based on the instructions that the moderator is giving them. And then lastly, we have a post-test stage. So users are reflecting on the experience, commenting on any issues, and also highlighting the positive things after the test. I have here written down that not always users will have answers to these questions because, well, for them, that was just a regular website or a regular app that they looked at. For you, of course, you know all of the details of your website, but yes, they might not think of in terms of like, yes, your filtering was just amazing. So you just have to accept that they will just complete the tasks and say that overall they liked everything on your website, but they might not go into such details and comment on every little detail that you might want to hear about. Okay, and then next, so in the description of this webinar, we also promised to give you a look inside Scandiveb's note-taking like template. And so we, for this purposes, use Notion, this platform where we organize all internal and also external client information. And so in the next slide, I will show you this video of how our templates look like. So here you see, and it's not starting from the very beginning. I don't know why, but so let's wait a bit. Here you can see that we already are at the post-test questionnaire. But normally, so we start at the beginning. So we see the person's name, and then there's like some description about the participant. Yes, okay, here we start. So the age group, their status. So is it the schedule? Is it done? Is it denied? Then there's also maybe device. So if you're testing on mobile or desktop devices, then we usually send gift cards to the participants. So you can just check if you have sent the gift card or not. Then here you see the pre-test questionnaire. So you just, as they answer these questions, you just check the right answers that they have said. If you have pre-given answers, you might not always. Then comes the test part. So you have this table and a short description of each task and statuses of how they completed the task. So if there were no problems, some problems, or really issues and they didn't complete. You write down, of course, some notes showing more detailed descriptions. And also there are quotes. So if the user said something really insightful, you write down the quote and later on use that in the presentation, for example. And then post-test questions also, you just note down what they said, maybe about like specific parts about the website and yes, their overall feedback. And then the last part, if you saw, there were like comments. So if anything additional comes to mind, like additional ideas you get, you can always also write down some additional comments at the end. Okay, so I'll let you watch a bit more. Okay. Yes, so that was the famous note-taking template that we at ScanDev are using. Okay, so let's turn to the learnings from more than 400 test moderation. So this one I really like because like at the beginning of this year, I was coaching my colleague who just started to moderate user tests. And she at the very beginning was like very nervous, like what if she forgets to ask a question? What if she says the wrong thing? You know, like a normal reaction of doing something for the first time. And I realized that there is a tip for stress-free moderation. So you have to remember that users don't know what you have planned. They don't know how many questions you're going to ask or what's the script that you have in mind. So even if you make a mistake and like forget to ask a question or say something that you didn't plan to say, users don't know the script, so they don't know if you're going to make any mistakes. So just a good, I think, tip to remember while you're starting the moderation process. Then also important to remember that you are not the user. So you know, what looks logical to you might not be for the user. So just a reminder to keep an open mind and don't go into the test with the mindset that you already know what are the issues and what are the problems. Always keep in mind that users come in with like fresh perspective and they will tell you what are the problems in their mind. So you have to be open-minded and accept that not always what you are thinking is actually the correct one. So just, you know, that's why you're doing the tests. Yes. Then next one, so users don't make mistakes. So this I do at like at the beginning of all tests. So remind users that there are no right or wrong answers. Because if they start to feel like they might make some mistakes and say something wrong or something that you don't want to hear, they will just, you know, limit the way how they answer the questions and just don't feel as free as they normally would. So this is very important. Just remind them that nothing they will say will be wrong or right. They can just feel free to express their opinions, their thoughts, and you are accepting everything they're saying. Also, it's important to be neutral. So remember to not bias users with how you form the questions. And this is very important because if you think about it, then imagine somebody is asking you, would you evaluate the checkout experience as positive? And of course, if you're asking such a question, the user is likely to think, okay, yes, it was positive, because you're already asking if it was positive. So you should always be asking, was the checkout experience positive or negative? So you always give both like the good thing and the bad thing. Was the filtering of the page easy or hard? And so if you're forming the question from both sides, they're more likely to think about it from both sides and actually give you honest answers. Then also it's important to avoid yes and no questions, because if you think about it, what will you gain from a one-word answer? We usually use such questions for quantitative research. So it's more popular to be asked in surveys, for example, because then if you send out the survey to 500 or like 1,000 people, you will know like the share of people who said that, yes, they like their website, or no, they didn't like the website. And then you know that maybe you have a problem there. But in user tests, if you ask yes and no questions, you're not gaining much because, okay, the user liked the website. So what? So it's just always a good idea to actually dig deeper. And consequently, the next one is ask why. So you want to understand the reasoning and like the thought behind the user's answer. So don't be shy and don't be afraid to actually ask them a lot of times why. So the same situation with my colleague at the beginning of the year. So she was like just joining the calls, and afterwards we were discussing how the calls went. And she was like saying, oh my God, you're asking why so many times. But if you're not going to do that, and if you just let users say those short answers and not really explain their answers, then you're not going to get these additional insights. So it's really important to really dig deeper and really ask users, why are you thinking so? Like, why are you saying so? Like, really always ask why. Also, a good idea is to ask users to think out loud. So even if they are performing like a mechanical task, like for example, card sorting, where they just start sorting the categories into groups, by thinking out loud, they might say something just unconsciously, something that gives you additional insights again. So yes, always a good idea to ask them to do that, and then you're likely to get additional ideas. And also just as they're speaking, it also might help you to formulate your ideas about like, what are the insights that you're getting. So that's just good practice to do. Then also remember differences in user characteristics. So nationalities, age groups, genders, and culture all influence your interaction with the user. And here I don't want to be like stereotypical, but you just have to take into account that different groups might act differently. So for example, if your target audience is maybe older, then it's sometimes happen that they might have some technical difficulties with, I don't know, for example, like share their screen, or they just take more time to answer your questions. And it's not always the case. I'm not saying that, but you just have to take into account that it might happen. Or for example, the same with different nationalities. So I am from Latvia, from the Baltics, and we as people are not very talkative. So we tend to be more quiet and like not very expressive. But I have also done user tests with, for example, people from USA. And for the first time when I did those tests, it was like really surprising for me that they talk so much. And of course, usually it's good because they give you some additional ideas and additional thoughts, but also you just have to take into account practically that those tests might take up more time than you expected. So yes, always just think about who's your target audience and plan accordingly. Then also a good idea is to observe your users. So for example, if you're doing the test on Zoom or Google Meets or wherever, and if they're not, if they don't have their camera switched on, then usually I ask them if they mind switching it on. Because by seeing users' facial expression, some hesitations or gestures, you can see sometimes more than words are actually saying. So for example, you see that the user is very concentrated and like looking at the page, and then suddenly they raise their eyebrow, for example. And then you can see that, okay, they didn't say anything, but you saw there was some issue there. And you might want to ask like, was there something wrong at that point? So observation is also very, very insightful in user tests. Also, it's important to be present in the conversation. And it's actually far more important to be actively present in the conversation and actually reacting to what the user is saying, because you can take the notes afterwards. So usually we record user tests just for this purpose, that we can rewatch the recording and make sure that we don't miss anything. But it's much more important to be present in the conversation and be like reacting to what the user is saying, because if you're not really reacting and just focusing on your notes, the user will feel like they're talking to a robot, and then automatically they might just close up and not give you as much information as they would. So just be there and be human and react to what they're saying. However, there's also important to keep the balance of being friendly and distant. So you don't want the situation when testers are trying to be liked, but you don't want to be seem too cold either. So with this one, what I'm saying is that if you are too friendly, they start to feel like, okay, you're my friend, and I don't want to give you bad news. So I'm just going to say positive things. We're going to joke around, and the user test will conclude. You don't want that. But at the same time, if you're too distant and like too cold, they might start to feel nervous, and they just might close up again and not tell you all that they would normally. So it's really important to find this balance between being friendly and being distant. So it's kind of friendly professionalism, I would say. So what they do versus what they say. So sometimes users will tell you one thing, but do something completely opposite. And it's not because they want to lie to you, it's just some human nature. Like they say that, yes, I think this is all good and no problems, but then you notice that they're actually making some mistakes and there are some problems. So you can't always trust what they're saying. I would recommend first looking at what users are doing and how they are performing the tasks, and if there are any mistakes, and only then actually, think about what they're saying and if it makes sense and goes with what they're doing. So you just have to be careful and really analyze it from both sides. And also be ready to improvise. So almost always something unexpected can happen, and you just have to be ready to react and change your plans quickly. So for example, you're using Zoom for your user tests and you don't have a paid account. And then this user is taking just much more time than expected for like to complete the tasks. And then you realize, okay, your call is going to end because it's like the 45-minute limit and it's just going to close. So what are you going to do? Or for example, you're doing a usability test and you have in your script that users have to find this product, add it to their cart, and like test the checkout process. But then as they open the specific product, you realize it's out of stock. What do you do? Like it's just inconvenient situation. So I advise to, before you're doing the user test, just to think about these situations and just think, what would I do if this would happen? And just, yeah, be ready to improvise a bit. So here's a summary of all these learnings. I think it would be very good and useful for everyone to just go through them once in a while. Even those people who have done like thousands of user tests probably at some point forget at least one of these. So just for successful moderation, my advice to you is just look these over and from time to time remember them. And then lastly, we have analysis and next steps. So first, you look at if you have any quantitative results to analyze. So for example, you look at the success rate for the task completion. So which tasks and how successfully were completed, or time taken to complete these tasks. So for example, this is very useful when if you have like two different variants of the same website, like for example, two different designs, then you compare time taken to complete the tasks in these designs and then see, okay, in variant A, people are actually doing the things faster. So maybe design A is actually better. Or you might look at the number of errors made during the tasks, or even like satisfaction rating. So all of these can give you insights into your quantitative results, and then you can make conclusions. Also, you might have qualitative results. So things like users' opinions and preferences, like what they said during the time when you asked some additional questions. Or also you might have unforeseen pain points highlighted. So maybe someone said something unexpected and you really didn't think about it, but then you realize, okay, this is really a potential pain point that this user highlighted, or any additional ideas generated. So I actually remember this from one user test when we were testing a landing page, and this user highlighted that they're actually missing this one type of information. And it was the one user who said it, but it made so much sense that from this one additional insight, we actually included it in the landing page. So it's also very important to look at the qualitative information you're getting from from the users. And then, so what's next after user tests? So normally, depending on the test type, you will want to incorporate user feedback, and then, so for example, redesign the necessary elements or add the new information that you realize now that was missing from the website, or you want to change the structure of the menu if you were testing it, and so on. But ideally, you would test again to make sure that results and feedback has actually improved. So yes, just important to not only do it once and then just throw all the changes in, but actually to retest and actually make sure that there are really improvements there. So with this, we have reached the end of the webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat and we will take the time to actually answer them. And don't be shy, write the questions. And yes, as my colleague is also writing in the chat that all the materials it will send to you in your email if you registered to the webinar. And also, if you didn't and you're watching it on another platform, you can always write to us, the marketing@ScandiWeb, and we will send the slides to you as well. So let's wait a bit for some questions. Okay, so I see the first one. What kind of education is needed to become user experience researcher? So there are also like official like educational institutes like universities who offer this type of education. But I would say that it's also possible to actually gain this knowledge. For example, here at ScandiWeb, we have this when you join the company as a new UX researcher, we give you like this education of different courses, like from all those different platforms. And then you also learn a lot just by practicing and learning from other colleagues as well. So there's different possibilities. Thank you, Patricia. And also my colleague is saying that we actually have questions in the Q&A. So let me quickly check. How much time should a questionnaire take? So if you're thinking about like a quantitative questionnaire, where like, for example, like this, so if you're thinking about like a survey, I recommend asking the less questions, the better, actually, because if, like, imagine you're yourself, you receive a survey, for example, from a company that you have subscribed to their newsletter, you're not likely to give much time to the survey. So only ask the very most important questions that you can think of. And yes, so limit the questions. In terms of time, I would say not more than 5 minutes. But it's another story if you are actually, for example, giving something back to the user for the time they're taking, then the questionnaire can be longer. Okay, a question from Laura. Is there any testing platform you would recommend in particular? Well, actually, so we have used different ones. So for example, usertesting.com, I think it's the most popular one, I would guess, out there. It's very convenient, but at the same time, it does have those cons that I mentioned before. So I've had this situation when I have set up like this very specific audience and like the screener questions and everything, but still I would get maybe not the exact audience that I wanted. So yes, you just really have to be critical about the platform that you choose and evaluate yourself which one is the best. Okay. I would like to ask, are you doing A/B testing and where is it come from? In the usability testing? Okay, yes, at ScandiWeb, we are doing A/B testing. It's a very popular method to actually test different things on your website. So normally, I would say, so like imagine, so you have your hypothesis, and then you're doing the user test to understand the overall feedback, but maybe so for example, the users are saying that the call to action is not prominent enough. So that's an insight you could get from a user test. But then if you want to make sure that the changes you are implying are really, really valid and will give you the results that you want, after that, we actually recommend doing A/B testing. So with that, you would get this confirmation which of the different variants that you have is actually performing better. Okay, somebody has troubles contacting HR. Future role. So I guess for this one, yes, my colleague is sending you the email to which one you should write. And please contact her and she will definitely reply. Okay, so if there are no other questions at the moment, you can also write to us after the webinar. Oh, sorry. Okay, my colleague is writing that there is a question in YouTube. Any examples on how to structure tests? Structure tests. That's maybe a bit broad question. Not sure what the person means. If you can maybe give us more detail in what you mean structuring tests, because like what we discussed before, so normally you would have this pre-test with the warm-up and just opening up questions. Then you would have this test part where you're actually setting up the tasks. If you're thinking about like the structure of like the tasks, then so normally, for example, if you're testing the checkout flow, for example, then you just go by sequence. So what are the things that you would like them to do? And step by step, they complete the tasks. I hope I'm answering the question. If not, then please just give us maybe more details and we will try to answer the question better. So I see my colleague is writing something. Okay, so I see that we don't have additional information, but if you have like a very specific question in mind, then please just drop us a message after, and we will of course give you a detailed answer to that one. So at the moment, I see that we don't have additional questions. If you can think of any afterwards, then don't be shy and write to us, and we will answer those. Okay, so here you can also receive my contact information if you have something specific messages to me. And also don't forget to sign up to our next webinar. So this one will be about SEO from our head of SEO, Lena. So you can sign up, and also my colleague sent the link in the chat. So we'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you for joining us.